But we have a special session right now. It's just one talk, and it's a really interesting one. Is Madison, are you here in the room? Oh, there she is. Okay. So many of you may know this, and some of you may not, but I was on the faculty at the University of Colorado for years. Did my climate work, but I also taught at the university, and I taught entrepreneurship and actually helped write the curriculum for entrepreneurship. And Boulder, Colorado is one of the most entrepreneurial places in the entire United States, second only to Silicon Valley. And when you go on the Google Earth these days and you look at the satellite pictures, they came from a company that I was a co-founder of. And Stu Waterman also was in that group too. And that company didn't do too well. It went bankrupt, and then our team went in and helped revitalize it. And now, when we had this idea to do this company, there was no Google. But we wrote a report that said there would be one. We didn't know what it would be called, and that started a process. And now Google Earth really is populated. In large part, the satellite data comes from the company that was created. It's called Maxar Aerospace currently, but it used to be called Earthwatch, and then first it was Worldview, then Earthwatch, then Digital Globe, and now Maxar. That's how it goes in the world. But at the University of Colorado, I was taken by a program at Anschutz, which is one of the top places in the country for biomedicine and medicine. It's kind of like the Mayo Clinic in its own way. And there they have a new program. It's called Climate Doctors. Climate Doctors. So this program has graduates now, and they have, some of them actually have degrees in atmospheric science and other physical sciences, and some of them have impacts, are impacting the doctors who are coming in with climate science right at the beginning of their careers. And one of them is here today, and I can't imagine a better name for a doctor than Madison Miracle. Dr. Madison Miracle, there's something about it. And when I talked to her the first time, I said, okay, yeah, she's the one. She's in Orlando. She's an emergency room doctor, so she sees everything going on. When she went there, she didn't think there would be any hurricanes, but now it's every other week. They're having a hurricane in Orlando, too. And so she's going to talk to us not about the way we used to do stuff, but about the way we need to do stuff. So without further ado, Madison Miracle. Thank you, Madison.
Well, thank you, Bob, for that wonderful introduction. And yes, my name is Madison Miracle. I guess we can go ahead and start the slides. There we go. Okay. So first of all, I have no financial disclosures. I am open to discussion if you have any sponsorships. But I will say, have a caveat that I did complete the Sustainable Healthcare Certificate with the University of Colorado Climate Medicine program. And my prior organization, Orlando Health, and then where I currently work, Advent Health, they're both members of Practice Green Health, which I'll touch upon later, but I don't, receive any kickbacks or anything from them. So this is just kind of a background. Like I said, my name is Madison. I'm originally from Atlanta, but I moved to Florida for medical school. I attended the University of Florida. And so that's when I really fell in love with Florida, decided to stay. And so these are just pictures of some of my favorite memories from living in Florida so far, and it's just kind of one of the reasons why, I am particularly passionate about sustainability and our climate, just so we can, protect the natural beauty of the earth that we have, in addition to protecting our health as well. So as we've kind of been learning so far, from all of our different speakers, the climate crisis is a major threat to human health, and it really is a health emergency. And so this is, from the effects of greenhouse gas emissions on air pollution, water quality, extreme heat, all of the disasters that we've seen thus far, and this is causing a lot of health effects that are kind of pictured here, and the U.S. healthcare system is unfortunately a very large contributor to this problem as well. So U.S. healthcare system contributes to about 10% of the overall U.S. emissions, which is more than the entire United Kingdom combined. And if we were ranked as a country, we would be the 13th in the world as a contributor of emissions to the world. And so the negative health consequences of this, just from U.S. Healthcare system pollution alone, attributes to 400,000 disability-adjusted life years, which means that those are the number of years lost that are caused by illness, disability, or early death from the effects of climate change and the climate crisis. And this is really similar in scope to the harm that we see from medical errors. So it's a very large problem that, unfortunately, we are contributing to as, within the healthcare sector. And emergency medicine in particular, work on the front lines of all of this. We are safety net providers for vulnerable populations, and we're kind of the leaders of disaster medicine as well, the first to see a lot of these patients affected by the negative consequences of climate change. And just personally, I have seen, several patients impacted by this, whether it be, a younger patient who I saw with severe heat stroke came in unresponsive. He was ultimately, we had him admitted to the ICU, and he never recovered. He was discharged to a long-term healthcare facility and, never the same again. And he's, in his 30s. And then additionally, kind of something that you may not even think about is one patient I recently saw with Hurricane Milton. He was preparing, trying to get his home ready for the hurricane, fell off a stepladder and hit his head and ended up with a massive brain bleed. So even, things like that can happen. And as kind of some of the other speakers have shown, like the Vibrio species, I've had several friends who work down in Fort Myers and other locations that were affected by severe flooding. And that was kind of what the top picture was showing, was the Vibrio infections. And that third picture is actually taken by my neighbor as an aerial photo of my neighborhood after Hurricane Ian and all the flooding we received. But even though, emergency medicine, we're kind of in a unique position at the front lines of this, it also means we are able to be leaders in this space in advocating for change and addressing the problem. So, what are climate doctors? Like, what even is this kind of emerging field of climate medicine? It's still developing. There's not, a specific definition of what a climate doctor actually is. I would just say it's anyone, who is a physician, or really any clinician or someone in healthcare in general who's passionate and interested in sustainability, recognizes the connection between climate and human health, and then, wants to try and mitigate some of those effects and work towards pursuing better change. And so I'm kind of going to go over a framework that I've created to show how you can get involved as a climate doctor. And so these are just like on different levels, the micro, meso, and macro levels. So the first kind of topic is on the micro level, directly with patients. So I guess the first issue is that we need to, first of all, recognize how human health is related to climate. And, we've received wonderful talks by speakers so far that kind of have explained some of those effects. And then also recognizing how climate change disproportionately affects vulnerable patients and populations. So the children, the elderly, pregnant patients, those with chronic medical comorbidities like cardiovascular disease, and then also those of low socioeconomic status. So like one example is, maybe a child, a 10-year-old patient with asthma who's having recurrent asthma exacerbations and requiring upscale in treatment and chronically visiting the emergency department. Well, maybe it's not that they just have a really bad case of asthma. Maybe it's because they're actually living in a low-income area next to a factory that is, has a lot of air pollution around it, and that's just contributing to these recurrent exacerbations. And so, in addition to just recognizing and being able to educate and counsel patients, we can also affect patients directly with patient care in making more climate-friendly medical decisions in treatment and just like on the clinic level. So there, for example, like in the emergency department or hospital, where we can choosing more oral medications instead of IV. Like if both options are equivalent, then there are significantly less carbon emissions produced by just one pill or one oral medication versus, the plastic packaging and all the other things that go into formulating an IV medication. And there are also many other, and these are just, very small, like individual examples. There could be another hour-long talk on all the rest of the examples that could be given on this, but like even like when prescribing asthma inhalers, for example, like powder-based inhalers are significantly less contributory to emissions than like the actual meter dose, like pump kind of aerosol inhalers. And then also, other measures just like within a clinic setting, like increasing availability of telehealth services so that patients don't have to drive and, contribute to air pollution with their car emissions. And that also increases accessibility to healthcare for a lot of patients as well. And so then kind of another example is on the meso level. That is another way that we can get involved as physicians or clinicians involved in this space, and where I am particularly most passionate and involved in. And so kind of a little bit of a background. I already mentioned that healthcare systems are large contributors to carbon emissions within the US and really the world, and there are so many avenues of why this is the case. But that also means that these are different areas that we can address to actually mitigate some of these emissions. And there is unfortunately inherent operational costs and emissions that we're just not going to be able to reduce, but there's still so much potential where we can actually change some of these things. And so whether that be in buildings and facilities with, new construction, having LEED certified buildings, or retrofitting some of the older buildings that we have to be more sustainable. And then along the supply chain, which is really the biggest contributor to carbon emissions from the healthcare sector. It's part of like the scope 3 emissions, which not to get into that too much, but it's just kind of the effects of like indirect emissions along the supply chain. So For example, if we have suture kits to repair lacerations in the ED, sometimes these kits have all of these unnecessary supplies that we don't even use. They're all wrapped in plastic, and they all just get thrown out at the end of the case. Versus if we can use suppliers that maybe have, less equipment, only the ones we actually use and actually need, and isn't packaged in plastic, because we don't really need that to take care of patients and repair lacerations. And then just along like the energy and transportation aspect, making sure that all of the HVAC and those systems within hospitals that power the hospitals and all of our lighting is more efficient and upgraded, and then even electrifying our transportation fleet of vehicles that transport patients around. Even EMS vehicles, ambulances have started to kind of look into this in other states. And then waste management is another big area. Kind of refining what and making sure that people are disposing of medical waste properly, because there are different types of medical waste, and biohazard waste is more regulated, but this ends up being incinerated, and so it's a much larger contributor to carbon emissions, because all of that gas and pollutants from the incineration process just goes into the air and atmosphere. And so if we can reduce the amount that we have by just being good stewards of waste management and disposing of things properly, that is definitely one way that we can help mitigate this as well. And then the OR and anesthesia is also a huge area for improvement. So anesthetic gases, there are some like desflurane that are incredibly more potent than others and provide really no medical benefit in comparison to the others. And really, a lot of hospital systems have taken these off their formularies because they provide no benefit and they're so highly toxic to the air. And other hospital systems have kind of addressed leakage of nitrous oxide by changing the way their piping works. And in just another brief point, a lot of these measures are actually cost savings. It seems like, there might be a lot of work into actually getting some of these done, but almost all of these methods, and in the long term at least, and a lot of times in the short term, are financially more lucrative and saving. So like one hospital system in Oregon, the Providence healthcare system, just by changing their nitrous oxide delivery system and reducing the amount of nitrous oxide that they had wasted, they saved over $3 million in 1 year. So these are, significant savings that, which isn't the main point, but is a huge benefit too, and sometimes can be part of pushback. And then lastly, just like food services, kind of maybe increasing plant-based meals within the hospital system, which could also increase the health of our patients too. And so how can you get involved in addressing climate change or some of these issues on the meso level? Well, this is where I have directed most of my efforts, and I would say the first thing is kind of to reach out and find what's already in place. So a lot of academic institutions and healthcare systems in more progressive cities already have, or may already have, some measures in place. So finding out, what is that, like what the hospital system is doing already, is definitely important, so that you can make connections to who you might be able to work with on ongoing issues, and then also just see what avenues you can improve forward. And then I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of what I have done, and I will preface this by saying that there is no one right way to take action or to do things, and I have encountered many obstacles and still encountering many obstacles in this space, and so I'm definitely, what I have done is not the perfect model for anyone else in general. I'm giving my example of some of the success that I've seen. And so I first started out, like when I started residency, I did residency in at Orlando Health, emergency medicine. And so when I first started, I knew that I wanted to be involved in trying to help, make change if I could within the healthcare system, but I didn't quite know how. I don't have any administrative background. I'm just have had my own medical training, and which has nothing to do with operations of healthcare systems or any of this. I've learned all about this on my own from my own research and just networking with others. And so I tried, at first reaching out to our director of operations to see what we did have in place. I was able to get a meeting with her and some other leaders who I felt like would be important stakeholders in this issue to try and address different problems from all of the other things and areas that I previously mentioned. But unfortunately, I kind of found that, as an emergency medicine intern in a huge corporation, there's really not much that I could do on my own. And I realized that I needed to do something else and find a different way to take action. And so I did some Googling. I found some people who I thought might be able to help, and I just emailed them. So one of those people was actually the executive director of sustainability over the entire corporation of Kaiser Permanente. And I just emailed her saying, hey, like, I'm interested in this. Do you have any recommendations? Not expecting her to reply at all. And graciously, she set up a Zoom phone call with me, and I was able to speak with her. Had a similar experience with Dr. Amy Collins, who's the head of Healthcare Without Harm, which is another third-party organization involved in this space, and a very large group who's doing a lot of great work. And she also met with me, and I was able to get a lot of good insight from them. And the biggest piece of information that I felt to be helpful was that, you need to go from the top down and get leadership and executives, healthcare administrators involved. And so that's what I did. I tried to, and also along the way, I would not be remiss to mention that I met a clinical pharmacist. Her name is Shauna Junco, and we have been working together on this within Orlando Health for a while, and she has been amazing in helping her. So I thank her. She's not here today, but just wanted to thank her. And so together we've kind of been recruiting others within our hospital system. So within supply chain, within buildings and facilities, waste management, and just getting people involved that may be interested, and ultimately created an environmental stewardship and sustainability committee, which is the little logo that I made up there. It's a little bit hard to see. And so we have this committee now of all of these members who are interested in invested. We have monthly meetings, and then, as I mentioned before, with going from a top-down approach, I met with multiple different corporate leaders within our hospital system, and some of them have been supportive or said that they would be, but haven't really kind of grasped on and become champions of this. I would say most successful avenue so far has been with our CFO. Luckily, we've been able to get some financial support in funding being members now of an organization called Practice Green Health. And so that's this logo up here. Practice Green Health is a third-party organization that helps hospitals and healthcare systems set sustainability goals and then achieve them. And so they have multiple different resources, tools, networking, and have, I think, over 350 hospitals and healthcare systems are now members, including large ones like the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, multiple academic institutions. And so this is really what I see. Like I said before, like in the beginning, I'm not financially tied to them other than now that our hospital is a member, but really in my eyes are kind of the gold standard for starting to get this process of climate medicine moving within the healthcare sector to help our systems implement these changes. And then kind of the last level is on the macro level. If none of that sounds appealing to you, or you don't really have involvement, or I guess the availability to be involved in those spaces, one other area that climate doctors or climate clinicians can be involved is on the macro level within the community. So this could be locally, regionally, or nationally. This could be within academia, so education. Other speakers have mentioned that we need curriculum to be developed for medical schools and other healthcare professionals on this topic, or within the research space. Bob already mentioned, and I will next, about the University of Colorado Climate Medicine program. They're kind of emerging leaders within the academic world and climate medicine as well. And then also kind of in the political landscape, if that's more your thing, working with different organizations in formulating policy or advocacy, even, simply writing op-eds or doing speaking engagements can also be helpful. And then also, there are multiple different third-party organizations, but also national medical associations and societies that are already engaged in this process. And for physicians and others who are able to, can reach out to these organizations to see how they can get involved as well. So there's a lot that's already being done, but there does need to be more. So how can you become a climate doctor? I am using this meme or analogy as the simply fact that there's nothing special that you need to do in order to get involved in this space. Really, you just have to be involved in the medical system or care about human health in general, and then take the next step to get involved and try and work on things. There's no specific qualifications yet that you need to have. But there are some things that are currently in development. There is some, or I guess, are some medical schools and is some curriculum being developed already to be implemented. There's still a long ways to go, but there are things out there already. And then the University of Colorado also has a residency elective, which I completed and we'll touch on in a second. And then there are a couple different fellowships now. So and fellowships in the medical world are, like, if you think about subspecialties like cardiology, endocrinology, those are all done via fellowships as kind of subspecialists after the pursuit of your residency program. And so now there are climate medicine or climate health science and policy fellowships. There are two currently, one at the University of Colorado and then one in the Harvard program, which is a spinoff of the University of Colorado. Then there are other types of graduate fellowships for non-physicians as well. And then lastly, there's the CU diploma that they've been creating that I'll touch on as well. And so, as I mentioned, when I was a second-year resident, I did an elective with the University of Colorado, and their climate medicine program. And through this, I focused my efforts on quality improvement within the medical space, focused on sustainability in healthcare. And so I created a QI project on reducing insulin waste in our emergency department. And then I, was able to present this as well as just the work of the elective at multiple different national conferences. And then we have a publication coming out. And that's not to, say that I have done all these things. It's more to say that, even by doing something little and just a small type of project, there are other ways that you can educate people within your specialty or within the medical field about the relation between climate medicine and climate health, because I had presented these at emergency medicine conferences and no one had even really known about or thought about sustainability in healthcare, and this was kind of a novel project and a novel topic. And then another novel thing that the University of Colorado is doing, or their School of Medicine, is this diploma in climate medicine. And so this is not necessarily a 1 or 2 year standardized fellowship program, but more of a longitudinal professional development program for healthcare professionals. So this can be like, obviously physicians, but also nurses, pharmacists, physical therapists, even healthcare administrators. I mean, you could probably do this program if you aren't in medicine, if you're just interested in learning too. There's really no like limitations. And it involves a series of certificate programs. So these are the different certificate topics that are more of an educational and kind of synchronous and asynchronous learning process for giving us the background and skills needed to be leaders in this field and advocate for climate-driven, patient-centered policies moving forward. And so I actually did the Sustainable Healthcare Certificate back in May in Salt Lake City. And this was just incredibly beneficial for me to network with other physicians and leaders in that space and just hear about different success stories, like how can I better make a pitch to leadership? What resources are available to for financing and funding, and even just providing some information on how to go about getting involved and making some of these changes. And I was also able to meet both Dr. Amy Collins and Seema Wadha, the executive director of Kaiser Permanente, at this meeting. So it was kind of like a full circle moment for me, having spoken with them on Zoom after just cold emailing them and then finally getting to meet them. So I wanted to highlight this program as well. And then there are multiple ways of getting involved and connected, and that's really the first step, whether it be on the micro, meso, or macro level. There are so many organizations that are already there. It's, you can just network with people like I did by emailing them and getting connected, and that was really how I was able to find some success in working towards this. And then also attending different conferences like this, getting connected with those in your local community and around, and just learning and educating yourself, and other conferences like COP, where Dr. Bensall is going to, even larger. And then different organizations like the Florida Clinicians for Climate Action, that has been mentioned multiple times, the CAC, and others. And so, despite all of the kind of negativity that we've learned about from the negative effects of the climate crisis on human health, that can definitely be disappointing, paralyzing even, and cause a lot of despair. But I would say that there is still hope for what we can do to mitigate some of these effects and move forward. There are many groups and organizations that are already doing great work. Even medical students who created this planetary health report card for hospitals and healthcare system to utilize and as a benchmark for their own emissions. And then also Kaiser Permanente is, who I'm not tied to, but wanted to highlight because they, I think probably most of you are familiar with them, are a huge corporation, mostly out west, but are, I would say, large leaders in this climate medicine space, because several years ago, they are actually achieved carbon neutrality. So, and now they're working towards becoming net positive in their carbon emissions as a healthcare organization. And they have a huge program of sustainability and a lot of measures in place to mitigate their own contributions. And so this kind of work can be done. Kaiser is probably one of the only organizations that has achieved such success on this kind of level, but it shows that our other healthcare systems can adapt these same models and work towards a similar thing as well. We don't have to be contributing to 10% of the US carbon emissions as we are currently. There are so many things that can be done to mitigate some of these effects. And thankfully, there are steps from a regulatory and legislative manner that are being implemented as well. So the Joint Commission actually recently created a sustainable healthcare certification for hospitals. Initially, they did try to roll it out as a mandatory process, similar to the certification that we have for like antimicrobial stewardship in utilizing antimicrobials or antibiotics for infectious diseases in a good way, quote quote. But currently, it's now a voluntary program that hospitals can voluntarily join in. But kind of looking how that antimicrobial stewardship program developed, I can foresee that there will be a time that this will likely become mandatory for hospitals as well, which is a good thing because then it will require our healthcare systems to actually take the steps to start doing this work. And so, while we can't completely nullify the healthcare sector's operational contributions and footprint, like I said, there are so many ways that we can take next steps to mitigate our effects, reduce our own emissions, and ultimately build a more resilient healthcare system while still continuing to care for our patients and provide quality treatment on multinational and global level. And so, I hope that, whether you're within the healthcare space or not, this can kind of be somewhat empowering to just kind of remain hopeful and start to take action. And then, hopefully we can all kind of work together for a better world. So that is it. And these are just some of my resources and references. And then a flyer for the climate medicine diploma program with the University of Colorado that I mentioned. There's a QR code if you're interested in learning about that further. And I'm also happy to take any questions, or if you want to email me or contact me later, talk about more about anything that I mentioned. Yeah.
Have you found ISO 14001 being used, the environmental management system?
I am actually not familiar with what that is. So
A lot of corporations and internationally, that is the standard, and that's actually slightly altered what the standard for government is. So it's ISO 14001.
okay. Yeah.
And it starts with that top-down approach.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
My daughter was in the VA hospital as a physician. Is there any group in the VA system that is looking at the sustainability on hospitals?
Yeah, so I don't know specifically, if there's a national VA group, but I do know that the VA, at least the Orlando VA and the Gainesville one, and probably multiple others in other states, are members of Practice Green Health, which is that organization that I mentioned that is starting to, help our healthcare systems implement these different initiatives. And I believe that they are members because they are tied to the government. And so, things like the sustainable healthcare certification that is being created by the Joint Commission, they are kind of the first to receive some of those regulatory changes. And so thankfully, they're kind of under the scope of the government, so whatever those kind of processes are, then they're under that. But other than that, I'm not sure about a specific group.
Thank you, Madison.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank